I don't even know what day it is. It's Thursday. It's the Mattriarchy. We have a full panel out today, guys. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, let's introduce ourselves. Let's go around the circle. Let's start with Fly Fox Pro.
Hey, that's me. That's the name of my YouTube channel and social media. My name is Daniel. For people that don't know, figure it's common knowledge, but nobody ever calls me it, so it's fine.
Well, in fairness, like everybody, it's the internet, right? So like
Right.
people get really cagey about, their real identity.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's short for Fly Fox Productions, which is the video production name that I've used, and I've done work under my own name on a way bigger platform than I have. So it's funny to me that people think like, oh, yeah, I know his real name. It's like, yeah, so does a lot of people, a lot more people than this community, just not in this sphere. So.
Excellent. So, Rick.
Yo. I guess I'm up next. I'm Cross Comics. I have a YouTube channel, Cross Comics, and I do Christian comics. Not sure what else to be said. Everybody knows my name too, Rick. No, I've never hit it from day one. Heck, I've just used Cross Comics as a branding. So, sort of like Fly Fox,
Right.
Get everybody to know the brand name.
Exactly.
Indeed. Brandon, I guess you're next, man.
All right, I'm next, and my real name is Rimfriend Trinklehammer.
I would have guessed there was something. There does seem to be something vaguely dwarvish about you. So,
No, I am. Hey, everybody, I'm Brandon Hollingsworth, and I'm with Brainy Pixel Productions, and we're a Christian animation and production studio. And I just got a bunch of Cross Comics in my email, so they're pretty awesome stuff, I have to say. So, Rick, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Let's distract you by my mother. She wanted to know what
Bring her on. Hey, come on in, Mom.
she can't hear you now.
I'm gonna tag Nicholas. So, Nicholas, you're next.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I'm Nicholas Mueller, and I am the creator of Demon Hunter Raven, and I am off camera right now because I'm killing two birds with one stone at the same time. I'm drawing, and it's just it doesn't look very pleasant at the moment. It's just a mess. So, yeah.
He's the shadow.
I am the shadow. I will be the one providing snarky comments throughout the deal.
Great.
You won't be the only one, brother. Don't worry about that.
We'll go back and we'll be the partners in crime.
So that's what the show needs is more snark.
Well, hopefully there'll be opportunities for me to be the pun next year.
So it's all good. It's all good. So I brought you all together tonight because today is, of course, the 3rd of December, which brings us leading up to everyone's favorite time of year. It's Christmas, right? And I wanted to go ahead and spend some time talking about not just comics that you all hold near and dear, but also the Christianity and the Advent season. So we've gone one way around the circle. Why don't we go ahead and Nick, start off? I know you've been on the show on the topic before, so you don't have to go into huge detail for the regulars, right?
Right.
But go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and Jesus and Christmas.
Well, I am a Christian. Became a full-blown Christian in 2009, but has always been part of my identity and kind of background. But not fully believing, or just whatever you want to call it. So, but Christmas, man, Christmas is really important to me. It's by far my most favorite holiday throughout the whole entire year. I think it's just a great time that we're kind of celebrating festivities. It's just a positive sort of feeling that you get your few bah humbugs and all that stuff, but I love it because me and my kids I got young ones, so to see the joy and the excitement that they get with it, and we do all these cool things, and then just learning the history of it and all that, just about Saint Nick and the things that all encompass it. It's just it's a great time that I get really depressed after it's done, because it's like, oh okay, it's done. So yeah, I highly enjoy Christmas, and it's just a lot to get excited about, and just the testimony behind it too is something that I just greatly enjoy. I'll tag out someone else here.
Yeah. Brennan, you're if you're going around the circle, you're the next one, man.
All right, so get out your stones, boys. Get out your stones. I am also a Christian. I got saved when I was 33 years old. So that's been about I don't know, about 13 or 14 years ago. Was sort of kind of raised in the church, not really. My parents were CNE Christians, Christmas and Easter only Christians. But I had a godly grandmother who tried to take her grandchildren to church as often as she could. Had I guess you would call it a false salvation experience when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I think it was, maybe 11. I don't know. Time is funny with me. And when I was young, I had like an experience where all of my friends were getting real emotional for some reason and going down to the altar and professing faith in Christ. And so I said, well, I guess I need to do that as well. Was baptized, was saved, quote unquote, but it never really affected my heart. It didn't really change me at all. Went through the rest of my high school years and college, and began searching for the truth, quote unquote, and began to study other religions. I read the Bible through and through. I read read the Book of Mormon. I read the Quran. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I read several Hindu and Buddhist texts as well, looking for the truth, and even thought about starting my own religion at one point and drew up documents to that effect.
Wow.
But it wasn't until
busy guy.
Well, hey, Nicholas, think about who you're talking to.
Oh, I know.
And it wasn't until I was 33 that I actually encountered the living Christ, and he transformed my life forever after the fact. Been trying to live every moment of every day for him since then. All that being said, I love Jesus, but I hate Christmas. I hate what Christmas has become in our culture. It drives me absolutely nuts how commercialized and fake and false it seems. When I get to do Christmas my way, I'm happy, and it's very quiet. It's very worshipful. It's very still and very God focused. And it's not about me, and it's not about presents, and it's not about lights, and it's not about any of that. It's about the light of the world and about his grace that makes me feel centered and peaceful. And I think one of the scariest verses in the Bible is Philippians, where it talks about Jesus, and he didn't consider himself equal with God, and yet he came to tell us about goodwill, God having goodwill to people on earth. And just think about that for a minute. That means that before that, God might not have always had goodwill towards people on earth. And how scary is that? So anyway, that's me.
I guess that's me up next.
Yeah, that'd be you, Rick.
Okay, well, I came to know Christ in 1980 when I was 7 years old. Didn't really know what it was about. Hey, you're 7 years old. Well, how much can you really take in? But my mom ended up coming to Christ about 3 years later. She dove in, found out what it was all about.
and really trying to reason out the bottoms of everything. I mean,
Yeah.
The whole foundation of the liberal arts, right? What we call the liberal arts today is not really the liberal arts, right?
Right. Well, the whole foundation of the scientific world as well came from, from Christian men and women who wanted to know God more. And so they saw an expression of God through creation. And so they began to study it to find out more about God. I mean, that's, astronomers and biologists and naturalists. That's what it was all about for decades, and is not that anymore. So
I think one of the things lost to Christian families is the idea of catechesis, of a catechism. We see that in the Roman Catholic tradition, but the Protestant tradition has lost that quite a bit. Now there's some confessional Lutheranism or Reformed Presbyterianism, you'll see catechism, but for a lot of people, once I'd say they came to the United States and you had this swell towards a more Baptist-oriented theology or Methodist-oriented theology, a lot of that catechism was lost. Just teaching people, where in the Bible does it say what we believe, and what are those things? And the sort of family worship aspect got lost. I was fortunate that my dad read us the Bible. We were very aware of what the scriptures said. I just wasn't making it my own in terms of learning, how to apply that.
I think another thing is, for a couple generations or maybe more, we were told, this is what it is, and nobody questioned why. We weren't told the why. We were just told this is it, and so we begin to not question it. Now we have a generation that questions everything, and we don't have answers.
Well, and part of that actually had to do with the larger society aspect of stuff. And also, you guys in the chat are saying we're having some audio problems, so let me know if anything's fixed or anything, because I'm not noticing it.
All good here.
But anyway, one of the things we had in a larger society is we really had this idea that science, the modernist and postmodernist idea first the modernist idea that science will give us truth, and even during the Reformation and after, the idea that truth is a philosophic idea, and we live our philosophy out through our religion. So that was the purview of priests and pastors and lay ministers and clergy to parse those truths
and then disseminate them out to the lay folk, right? The people who couldn't be bothered to read it themselves or study it, or that's a huge misconception. Or
didn't have the languages, right? I mean,
right.
I mean, because that was one of those things too, where like if you went to university, you learned Greek and Latin, but not everybody went to university. So some people.
And if you look at it, it plays right to one of the primary weaknesses that Satan knows that we all have, and that's we're ultimately lazy. Oh, wait. You mean I don't have to learn Latin and read the scriptures in Latin? I don't have to learn Greek and read it in Greek? Well, okay.
The scripture comes to mind, for a lack of knowledge, my people perish.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of interesting, the idea of just in the last few centuries, we had people like Granville Sharp, who was a statesman, a scholar, a writer, and also a Greek scholar that articulated rules in Greek that are invaluable to the Christian today in terms of proving Jesus's divinity and some of these core aspects of the faith. And those were people that they grew up learning all of these things from the cradle. And today we're very broad and not deep. And so there's this wide amount of knowledge that people know things about, but they don't really know the things.
Right.
I know, like the Wikipedia Cliff Notes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Wikipedia Cliff Notes. Is that a thing? Is that a real thing? And
that's where you guys read your Bible, right? That's where I go to. Can I still say on here? Am I still good?
I'm sure it has no there are no these A's or ands in that Wikipedia Cliff Notes, right? It's just all the big words.
Citations, though, it gets a little weird.
No articles here.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that talking about the the philosophy of education was greatly affected, right, in the late 1800s on up. And then you also have, textual criticism and the idea that, what do we really know about the text? But the other side of it too is we really had in the early part of the 20th century this abandonment of science by the church, and the abandonment of culture by the church. And so the mechanisms by which to talk to lead people into these truths were limited to Sunday school, church activities, if you're really serious Wednesday Bible studies, stuff like that, where it became entirely churchy activities instead of them being, broad, like cultural touchstones of that.
And just look at the time you've lost. You go from, basically 24/7, or at least the waking hours in the week, to maybe 3 hours in the week, if you're lucky,
or just Sunday morning in some cases.
Yeah. To disseminate truth, and that's, we lost that battle. We lost that battlefield.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then, and also the idea that, we've professionalized education,
Sure.
Instead of every compulsory education, kids have got to spend, 40 hours a week with, these professionals. When you're missing that time that, when you're walking down the road and you're standing by the gates and all that kind of stuff,
Are you just trying to get me started on homeschooling, Matt? Is that the ploy here?
No,
because I'll go, brother. I'll go.
Yeah.
I thought this was about Advent, but I'll go on homeschooling.
No, actually, we did. That's just part of my default programming.
Right.
We'll be graduating.
You haven't told us how you feel about.
Well, yeah, that's true. I hadn't. But I was just saying we're getting ready to graduate our second in the spring. So yeah. So I'm all down for the homeschool.
That's awesome.
But no, I was raised in the church. My grandfather was a long-term deacon. My dad was involved. Grew up several generations, for many generations, involved in the church. In the unaffiliated Bible churches, right? Which, as I like to joke about, are Baptists that don't like to pay membership dues. So I was very much into all of that kind of stuff. I was saved when I was very young, and it was a definite, like, life-changing thing. Yeah, I was 5.
Wow.
But I was mildly embarrassing story. I was sitting there on the toilet thinking about death, and
which most of us do.
Yeah,
as you do.
And just the about eternity, and about who I was as a human being, and about that
5?
I inevitably, like, if I don't throw myself upon the grace of the Almighty, then my number's gonna be up.
Sound like my oldest.
So
you were a serious little kid, man.
Yeah. When I'm not flippant, I'm fairly serious. Those are two modes. But yeah, I was not Baptist themselves. Okay. Wow, the chat's talking about not Baptists themselves, the churches. Southern Baptist Convention, let me tell you. Anyway,
I think when I was 5, I was probably thinking about whether to throw the rock or whether to eat the rock. That was probably my biggest philosophical debate.
Yeah,
and Matt's over here thinking about life and death and eternity and the weight. Yeah. Therefore,
I had the unenviable position of having my grandfather murdered when I was 18 months old.
Oh my word!
And so that had put a cast over my life. That's one of those things where the shadow of that affected my entire family for decades. Wow. It still does, actually. The idea that life is short is something that was just, that was just part of my growing up.
And if you think about the majority of history going back, that would have been everyone's experience. They would have known a number of people that their siblings that died as an infancy, or death was everywhere. It was all over. we're separated from death today in a way that causes us not to think about those things. We think that we're invincible. We listen to Elon Musk talk about uploading our consciousness into a computer, and we're like, yeah, man, that sounds great. I want to live forever. And then we think, no, maybe that's not so good. One of the things that I think about a lot is how death is both a curse and a blessing to us as human beings. Because if God had allowed us to become sinful and live forever in that eternal state, that's the ultimate curse, is to live eternally separated from God. By providing death, he at least allowed us not to have to live in that, and to eventually be, as Christians, resurrected and glorified and all of those things. But the shortness of life is a blessing, because then we spend only a moment here in this body of death, and then we go on to glory. So it's one of those things that I think people that do have those things, like my parents were very, very honest with me and my brothers about family history, about death, and about abuse and things like that. And so very much like Reese, I became a Christian at 5 as well. I remember very clearly my brother articulating the gospel, my older brother articulating the gospel to me, and recognizing my need for a savior from my sin, knowing that I was sinful. And I think that probably has something to do with it, is that like the more honest you are with children or with people in general, just society, about things like death and sin, abuse, injustice, real, true injustice. It's like those things, like it's not, we think like, oh, we're taking away the innocence of the child, but really we're preparing them for a world that is already going to destroy them. There's not a single television show on TV now that's trying to indoctrinate them with something. So either you do it as well, and you realize, like, I have to be facing these things with from a Christian perspective, a Christian worldview, and preparing children for that, or I allow the world to do it for me.
Sure. What is it Vodi Bakum says? If you send your kids to Rome, don't be surprised when they come back as Romans.
Right.
Yeah.
Vodi's the best, man. I think like everybody before they get married should be required to listen to like Vodi Bakum's teachings about marriage and family, because they've been invaluable to me and my wife. So I recommend him wholeheartedly for people.
Yeah, it was actually, I got to, and I don't want to turn this into a Vodi love fest, although I could, but after I was saved, like a year or two, maybe a very short time after I was saved, I had the privilege of hearing him speak in a church not far from where I live currently. And it was on fatherhood and on family. And I could not do anything, but I took my family down to the altar when he was done and made a covenant before God and my family that I would be a different type of father and husband moving forward. And I've tried to do that ever since. It was a very moving, very powerful sermon.
Convicting, I imagine, as well.
Super convicting. Yeah. I felt about that talk. So.
Well, to bring it back to the Advent, because that's what the topic, right, is this Christmas season. One of the things I'm grateful for as a kid is my parents, Christmas was about, there was presents and there was things like that, but it was so much of it was about recognizing who Jesus is, what he came to do. And in that way, there was a little bit of a catechism going on in my family. And that's something that my son's really young and he's not really speaking yet, but we're reading the Bible out loud, and we're doing these things, and preparing him, I think, is one of those things that I think about all the time. And one of the things, like, there's debate that people have about whether or not Christmas ought to be celebrated, Christmas and Easter ought to be celebrated, or if there's a prohibition about that in the scriptures. And that's the kind of inter-Christian dialogues that people have. I think there's good people on both sides of that topic. But one of the valuable things for me, I think, about celebrating it is taking a time where you're focusing on what's important about the incarnation. What's different about it? Why is it important that Mary was a virgin? Why is it important that adoption really makes somebody someone's son? In terms of Joseph being the adopted and in a inheritance sense, the real father of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's like, why are those things so important to who Jesus is, what he came to do? And like, I guess an argument could be made that, oh, well, you can do that all year long. But I think a season set aside in that way, almost like a liturgical calendar of sorts, is somewhat helpful.
I'm not big O Orthodox, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, the fathers laid out the liturgical calendar for a reason. In an early society without mass communication, often without literacy, these things were important. That didn't stop becoming important just because more people can read and everybody can have a Bible, right? I think that there's an important. I don't think it's a doctrinal. I don't think it's a salvific import, but I do think that there is a cultural aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other side too is we have a time of year where everybody expects Christmas, and people are super permissive of gospel presentations disguised as Christmas carols. And
if they're good Christmas carols, yes,
right.
The good ones, yeah. And that's one of the things I think it's I understand people that are hesitant, like, well, the Bible doesn't say when Jesus was born, and are we adding to Scripture? And I definitely understand that those are concerns, but I don't think it does. I don't think we're tending to the times and the seasons. We're paying attention to we're redeeming the time if we're not saying, hey, it's Christmas and everyone pays attention to it.
And then there's also like the funny thing is Christians today, they don't like the words theology or doctrine or creed or liturgy. Those are bad, naughty words. Like, oh, well, we just have a relationship with Jesus. Oh, that's theology. You have to explain that because that means something. Oh, no creed but Christ. Oh, that's a creed. And then during the summer you have your movie sermons. And then, and then as the summer ends, then that's when you do your vision casting. So you have your liturgical calendar. Don't lie to me. You're just doing it very poorly, inadequately. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think there's this tendency for everybody to sort of look at the people of the past and say, oh, they were ignorant. They didn't even take baths. How can we learn anything from them?
Well, most of the world still doesn't take baths. Let's be completely honest here.
But
we're the American habit of bathing is weird to most of the world.
Yes, it is. They bathe once a week and go to the market every day, and we go to the market once a day and bathe we bathe every day and go to the market once a week. So we have it exactly backwards.
Right. And I think
maybe there's a happy medium there, though. I don't know.
There's I think it was John MacArthur said something about basically, like, there's these huge churches that have a lot of people in there that don't know what they believe. And as soon as real persecution comes, they're going to be huge mausoleums empty, because if they are real Christians and persecution comes, they're going to be searching for something to grasp onto. And can that church provide it? Mm-hmm. And I'm not out here criticizing every mega church or every denomination or something, but what I think people should think about is what they believe and why they believe it, to come back to something I said earlier.
No, I actually had a buddy convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. And he was from he'd grown up in the E-Free churches, but he converted to Eastern Orthodoxy. And a big part of his reasoning was like, the Eastern Church is the church of martyrdom. Like, they survived the Russian bloc, and what are you doing with your life? Like, that's a good argument, but
I think just hang on another decade, and we'll be right there with them. I'm afraid. So.
Man, hang on another few months, and we'll be right there.
Goodness.
Well, I don't think it's going to go that bad that fast, but anyway.
I do have a question though. If we do see like real hardcore, persecution come our way like they did back in the way. We're really light here, but how fast do you think Joel Osteen would renounce his Christianity?
I thought he already did.
Yeah.
Wait. Joel Osteen's a Christian? What?
Yeah, man. I mean,
oh wow.
Wait. What am I missing?
He might be a nominal Christian.
Yeah.
Christian
Let's
name
just say
only.
that's between him and the king of the universe, and leave it at that.
So,
I don't feel comfortable with making that call, even if his doctrine is horrible.
Wait, he's got a doctrine? I thought it was just get rid of.
Hey,
Well, the Bible does say you will know them by their fruits.
True, exactly. Exactly.
amen, Rick.
Right on the nose.
to go back to an earlier point, though, I do think it is really important that we spend a little bit of time thinking about and talking about the incarnation and thinking about things like adoption. And it's because those things are critical components of God's plan, and that's what this is really ultimately all about. And so I think that's why those things are in the calendar, why they're kind of baked into the fabric of our reality, is that because, God wants us to talk about those things. He wants us to have discourse and think about those things and discuss them and talk with them, with our children, with our neighbors and our friends. And this is just kind of an easy out, right? It's a good opportunity to do that. It's kind of, like I said, it's kind of baked in. So, and
we sometimes, I think, forget that the whole universe was designed to show us God.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Romans 1.
We were placed in the middle of this, and everything about us is a teaching mechanism. The relationships we have, God is the Father because of his relationship to the Son, but he's called the Father because we're biological beings. I mean, that idea has any value because of our nature as biological beings.
Yeah, he could have been called the Grand Poobah, and not have anything to do with biology. There's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
it was a way to relate to us.
Sure,
right. Yeah, right. And he built the way to relate to us. I mean, it's like
the same. Go ahead.
It's an integrated whole, the creation and the message of the Creator together to lead us and to demonstrate to us these nearly indescribable truths of being.
Yeah, and if you look at all the symbolism that God uses, right? Wine, right? And stains and blood, right? Fishing. How many people on the planet understand fishing? If you're hungry, you probably understand fishing, right? If you've lived anywhere and tried to ferment anything, you understand wine and its properties and how it stains stuff. So I mean, all these things are so kind of fundamental. And God knew that when he created all this stuff and put it together. So,
right. I think there's also a tendency towards the ancient heresies all the time, right? People are still fighting against all of them. And one of the ones today that people is disguised. Most of them are coming to us in the ancient names, but it's Gnosticism. Basically this idea that matter is evil, that the physical world is inherently bad, right. And that, we're being rescued from the physical world when God says, no, I'm redeeming all of creation. Jesus will save all of the earth. All of the earth will be redeemed. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah, we'll still be physical beings. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, it will be. Jesus right now has a physical body. For eternity, there will be a physical body, and it's like that doesn't just disappear. And we tend to gloss over that and think, well, we're getting rescued and we'll be up in heaven with in clouds with harps, and it's like, no, in eternity we will have physical bodies. We will be on earth. We'll be in God's presence and in perfect communion with him, but we will continue to be gardeners and to be cultivators and artisans and artists. And one of the things that we were talking about culture earlier, one of the things that's lost is by making that, embracing a light form of Gnosticism, if you want to call it that, is you're losing your respect for the actual world, and all you're thinking about is the spiritual dimension of humanity, when that's not all of that. That's not all of what the Bible says about redemption and what is going to happen in the end times. It's not just like this separation of physical and spiritual. No, it's a restoration of that.
And I actually think that a lot of that fact that the physical reality of the immaterial world, right, is one of those things that we tend to like not notice, but I think that our forebears did, because you look at the great cathedrals, you look at even icons, and I know there's a whole thing with icons, but the fact people were making things to say, I'm using my talents and my skills to give honor to God. I'm building these tangible reminders of God's grace. Christmas ornaments, like nativity sets, all of these things are ways for us to remember these real truths of history, these real truths of and history that's beyond our dimension, right?
Well, it's like Bach wrote most of his music for the church, and he signed a lot of that music SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, to the glory of God alone. That was the mentality. When we talk about something like the Protestant work ethic, that's sort of mocked today. But that idea comes from the idea of doing everything to the glory of God. That means brewing beer to the glory of God, farming to the glory of God, plumbing, writing beautiful music to the glory of God.
And that wasn't something that was absent in the pre-Protestant movement either. I mean, people, like, you look at like some of those cathedrals in Europe, 3 and 4 generations spent their livelihoods to build these things, so that their ancestors, generations, or their descendants generations hence, could look up and see Jesus feeding the 5,000, because that's how important that was to them.
Well, I think there's also a tendency for ignorant Protestants today to look at the church before Martin Luther and say, there was no Christians about. No, the Bible says that the gates of hell will not prevail. So there were Christians at all times from the time of, Jesus' resurrection until today. There was not a period where there was no Christians. These were, some of them were, some of them weren't, just like now. And I think one of the things we need to realize is that the people in the past, we ought to look at them and consider what they had to say and check it against scripture like a Berean, but to recognize that there is something to that. Like when we build the church today and we build it out of the cheapest possible materials, and then you walk down the street and you see a mosque that's beautiful and wonderfully made to a false god, and without loans, because in Islam they're not allowed to take out mortgages. That's part of the teachings of Islam. They did that all over time, building it piece by piece in a lot of times in a very beautiful way. And today we just like we'll do a metal building and just carpeted interior and a simple. And it's like even when you had the arguments about how do you have an altar? Where's the pulpit placed? And all of these things that happened in Christianity over the years, there was still a sense that there was craftsmanship going into this to make it a beautiful place where people could come in and learn about God, worship God.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely something. And though I think once again, and speaking about Advent and the Christmas season and the decorations, all of that. Not necessarily all of that, but very, very much of that stems from those same sorts of traditions, and that's why people take a look at, like, there are people that mock Christmas for being so gaudy and so ostentatious. And okay, think about this: if you're serious that we are symbolically welcoming the coming of the God Man, that the Creator of all, the King of the universe, the High King of heaven, deigned to descend himself to our realm, what glory is he not due? Right?
Sure.
Right? What glory is he not due? And the fact that he didn't consider it, something to be grasped, that he was humbled himself to be born and to be laid in a manger, to be born amongst beasts, to be first glorified on earth. The first people to shout his praise were shepherds, the crooks of ancient Palestine, and that this is the level of humility that the great God has. That does not take away from his greatness at all. And are we going to sit here and be like, oh, well, if a manger was good enough for baby Jesus, then maybe this old shopping mall is good enough for Jesus today? I mean, I've been some of my best church experiences were in churches that were in reclaimed storefronts. So I'm not dogging on that.
Sure. Well, I think there's something to consider when you think about the story of the woman coming in and washing Jesus's feet, right? And who is it that shouts up like, "Oh, that money could have been used to give to the poor"? Judas. You know, and that's not to say that anybody that says, "Oh, well, that money could be used for the poor today," is a Judas Iscariot going to betray Jesus. But there is something to consider in that Jesus is worthy of honor and praise, and he was being honored in that moment with a very expensive gift, and in a sense preparing him for what he was about to do. And so there is a sense in which, like, when we create something today as artists, there's a tendency to focus so much on the art itself and not, I think, the ultimate goal of doing it to the glory of God. It's something I struggle with, right? Because it's like I'm so focused on, like, I want to make this as good as possible for its sake and not necessarily for God's sake. And I think we sort of lose that mentality of, like, as Christians, everything is within God's sphere. There is nothing that isn't under King Jesus's feet. Yeah. And that includes everything that I do, especially my art, because it's born out of who I am as a Christian. The way that I think is inherently expressed through my art. And I don't know, I think just being conscious of those things helps people become better artists, because they're striving to do something to the glory of God and to create good art. And then that's the best of both.
And I think Reese, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and Nicholas and I, we talked a little bit about that last time I was on, where we were talking about one kind of trick that we've learned, or we talked about learning, is that if you consider that creation an offering, right? I mean, if you think about Cain and Abel, right? You know, where did we run into problems? Well, it was when Cain didn't bring the first fruits. You know, he brought the not the best of what he could bring before God, and that's where God wasn't happy. And so with that offering, and I think as Christian creatives, we have to be very careful in that when we are putting all this time and effort and money and lack of sleep and all that stuff into these creations, we're not doing it for us. We're not doing it for our customers. We're doing it as a worship offering for Christ, because we're putting it on the altar before him. Right. So I think it's an easy way to think about it.
It's like one of the things
not easy to do. Just easy
right.
To think about.
One of the things I like to think about is, things are true and beautiful because God made them to be true and beautiful. And so we were talking about modernism and postmodernism earlier, Reese was, and we think about like that, the cultural movement towards, we're going to separate the religious and the public spheres. And yet the things that are true in science are true because God made them that way. Sure. The things that are true in sociology are true because God made them to be that way. And there is a standard of beauty, and that can be, the taste can be subjective, but there are things that are inherently beautiful, like a rose and the symmetry of God's creation. I think about like how I watched a lecture from Dr. Jason Lyle about fractals one time, and he, just going into the beauty of how everything in the world is founded upon mathematics, and the beauty that creates, and it's so much to think about, and how can you express it all?
But if you listen to the world, all that happened by accident. All that magic math behind the universe. It just happened to fall all together.
Well, that whole thing with the problem with induction, that the future will be like the past, and that they can't justify that. Don't worry about that. Or
that gravity is such a specific and precise number that if we're off by 100th of 1,000th of the percent, nothing would exist. Just crazy. But anyway, well, I don't know where Reese went, but I've got a question. Will there be Christmas trees in the new creation?
Well, will there be Christmas trees?
Yeah. When heaven and earth are remade and there's no more sin, will there be Christmas trees at Christmas time?
I don't know whether there'll be Christmas trees, but there'll be pine trees. So somebody. I'm pretty
I
sure
think-
there's going to be pine trees.
Yeah, well, I think I don't know that there will be. I think just pure speculation on my part, but I think I have a theological basis. Is when you have perfect communion with Christ at all times, what's the need for a season or a holiday to celebrate that? You're in perfect communion with Him at all times,
Right.
and worshiping Him perfectly in everything you do. I don't think there'll be a call for that type of thing, but. As Kim said, people couldn't decorate trees. I think there'll be decorators in the new earth. And
I think there will be.
Well,
I think there are people who are made to be decorators.
Yeah.
I know this won't be the perfect analogy, but you had kingdoms way back when, that they'd celebrate the king's birthday or whatever. So why wouldn't we celebrate
maybe
him still coming, on Earth when he did?
Could be. You got me there, Rick. You've defeated.
Who knows?
Just to celebrate him, because he is worthy of the worship. Why not? Take a day or a week, a month, a year, every
1,000 years. Yeah, I think worshiping Him will be our full-time gig, actually. So we'll have to fit in all our other work around worship.
Right. It's like, Jesus, can you come on to the fishing boat with me? I mean, I know that you're familiar with that.
You've done that a couple times,
right? Well, we're still streaming because I went and checked. Reese is gone, but we're in control now.
Right.
So
he messed up leaving this bunch in control. So.
Right.
I'm assuming his laptop probably died. That happens once in a while when he's streaming, and it won't be plugged into an actual stuff.
Well, hey, I've got an Advent related story that involves creativity. So, several years ago, my family and I, we don't often do Advent oriented activities, but we were trying it. You know how you do, and you try something out, and maybe it sticks as a tradition, and maybe it doesn't. Well, we were doing the Advent candle thing, right? Which I highly recommend doing, with your family, and do better than me and stick to it. But so we went through the whole season, and we did, all the candles like you're supposed to do. Until the 24th, right? Until December, until Christmas Eve, and then of course the world exploded because it's Christmas Eve and you got kids and things get really busy on Christmas Eve and Christmas, and so it was like a week after Christmas, and I came into the dining room where we had the candelabra there with all of the candles on it, and every single one of the Advent candles were lit. Right, and burned down to a certain degree, except for the Christ candle, the last one, right? Because we didn't do it on the 24th, and it just struck me as so weird, and I was just like, what kind of weirdos would light all of the Advent candles but not the Christ candle? And so it inspired this story that I started writing, and I'm still editing it now, but it takes place in like my fantasy sort of world. It's in the world Tenet's Tales, Nicholas, for you to, and it takes place at this monastery, and the monastery has been taken over by essentially like demonic creatures in human disguise, right? And they were going through the motions, and they were lighting all the candles, but couldn't light the Christ candle, and that winds up being the clue that sets our hero off and discovers that the things that are going on in the monastery aren't quite what they were meant to be. So, and that's what kind of starts the adventure. So that's what kind of weirdos don't like the Christ candle. Demonic monks, basically.
Nice.
Matthew says he's trying to get back in.
So Rick, is there a Christmas tradition that you have that you like to do, or your family has done?
Probably not anymore.
Too old.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we moved a few years ago. We put up the Christmas decorations and all that. But before that, it had been years since we put up the Christmas decorations. I guess it's just not.
I don't know.
The case of the missing Rick.
It says we're live again.
We could be.
I've got the chat from the thing, so I don't know.
Oh, it looks like it's coming back up on the same video. There we go. Awesome.
It'll probably just go right back to where we were before.
So Rick, if you're listening, just come back to the same link and see what happens.
Yeah. So we were in the middle of a discussion. Somebody was talking about on the Twitter's chat. I saw somebody say that they eat pigeon for Christmas. I saw it somewhere.
Yeah,
Twitch.
Somebody said they eat pigeons for Christmas. Yeah. How do you even chat on this crazy thing? Do you have to have like a login to chat?
I don't know. I just, as far as like getting to the stream chat, I have a little thing off to the side.
Yeah,
I can see the chat, but I can't do anything. It's just like showing me there.
I think you have to be logged in separately.
Yeah, I think probably. I'm just going to YouTube and typing it on YouTube, but So Rick, you were telling us how your family is lazy and doesn't decorate for Christmas.
Yeah, we used to decorate every year. Actually, I think I know probably close to when it happened. I think it's like 20 years ago now. When my grandparents died.
Yeah.
Just things became blah.
Right.
Not a lot. And then, not that it should be about this, but not a lot of money, just it's just me and my mom. So, I dad my picture, but he doesn't live with me and my mom, and all that. So it just became a chore. I wouldn't say a chore. I'm not sure how to describe it.
I get what you're saying.
I would really like to get back into it, I'm just not sure what to do to get back into it. Maybe it's just doing it no matter what.
I think you should go get a Charlie Brown Christmas tree and decorate it this year. Just a little bitty tree that bends over when you put an ornament on it, and you put a little blue blanket around the bottom, and it looks perfect, and you'll be done. Some popcorn, thread some popcorn on it, and that's a lot of fun. Go for it.
So here's a true story. The first Christmas my wife and I were married, we had no money. I mean, nothing. We were super poor.
Been there, done that.
And I'd actually gone through a spell where I'd been working a construction gig, and I got late. The company went bankrupt, and so I couldn't find work for almost 3 months. And so she and I were engaged, and she was gracious enough to help me pay bills, but it was pretty much all of our savings that we'd put together, that we'd put up individually and whatever. We had nothing. And I had gotten a job, but it wasn't, it was just barely paying stuff. And so, of course, getting married is not necessarily cheap. So we didn't have anything. So I had a buddy who owned a little bit of land out in the country, and he had some pine trees. And so we went out and cut one of his pine trees down, and it was pretty sparse. It wasn't quite Charlie Brown style, but it was close.
I remember as a kid. First of all, I thought you were going to say you cut your luscious locks and she sold her watch chain, but her watch to buy you some combs. But
that's her shoes. She has to sell her shoes.
When I was a kid, we money was tight, and one year we couldn't get a tree, and so my mom took green tinsel and she hung it from the ceiling and made it go down into the form of a tree, and that's I don't remember any other tree as a kid. I don't remember any, there were so many years where we did have a tree. It's not in my brain, but that year, because it was different, because she went out of her way to try to provide something for us. And it was memorable and special. So.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. We just, I had a little interesting Christmas story from me. So I was talking, my granddad was killed. That actually happened on the 27th of December, 1978. So Christmas was always weird growing up because, it's Christmas and kids love Christmas. And my dad was always super depressed, and he didn't want to be depressed because, it's Christmas and the kids are Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And so it was always a weird time for my family. It wasn't just my granddad; it was my uncle was killed at the same time. It was was a whole deal. But it was a tough thing growing up with that. It was something that I didn't. And Christmas had always been a huge, important thing for me when I was little, and even when Amy and I were dating and everything, I was super into the season, all that kind of stuff. And then shortly after we had children, I started getting really cranky around Christmas time, and I didn't really have a reason for it or anything. It just was something that happened. I'd get real humbuggy, and I'd be really mad about, I'd get just a real chip on my shoulder about all the gaudiness and all of the the commercialization and all that kind of stuff. And one day, my Amy, she tells me, she says, you didn't used to be so cranky about Christmas time. And I said, well, it's all this and this and this. And she's like, none of that's changed. What's going on with you? And she's told me I was making people miserable with my grousing. And so I had to sit back and think, okay, what's going on here? And I realized, I sat and prayed about it, and I realized that I had absorbed some of my dad's behaviors and my dad's conflict about it.
Yeah, the programming clicked it.
Yeah, it did, because it was like, now I'm a dad, and this is how dads act at Christmas time. But my dad was dealing with this trauma reaction from his father having been killed over Christmas time. Yeah. And it wasn't, even though that's part of my life, I was an infant when that happened. Right.
Yeah.
And I do grieve for not knowing my granddad in that way, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And it really freed me up. Coming to this realization really freed me up to reevaluate that time and to kind of to own it for me and my family in a way that gave me a lot more appreciation for it. So one of the first things that Amy and I did together in relation to all of this is we actually made a wreath. That's our family wreath. That we took just stuff some
experiencing right now in this moment, about this party. And then everybody would do that. And I was like, let's go back to partying, right? So we'd go back to the party. Well, before we were done, I would take the whole class, and normally this is about 30 or 40 students, around to the back of the church. I wouldn't let them wear their coats. I'd let them around to the back of the church where there's a giant dumpster, and I would open the dumpsters up, and the smell of the garbage would come wafting out. And I'd pull out of my pocket a little jar with a slug in it. And I would say, this is what Christmas is all about. And of course, they looked at me like I was crazy, right? I'm like, smell what you're smelling, right? Feel, and everybody's shivering and they're cold. And I'm like, this is what Christmas is about. And then I would read this verse, and they're all looking at me like I have 3 heads. And I said, this is what Christmas is about from Jesus's perspective. He was in heaven. He was equal with God. Everything was great. Everything was beautiful. Everything was wonderful. And all the emotions that you have on those cards, he was experienced those in the presence of the Father. Happiness, joy, contentment, right? But he laid it all down to come to a cold, stinky, nasty place and basically become this. And I would hold the slug up and die for all of you. Pin drop. And like, that's what Christmas is all about.
Yeah.
And then we'd go home.
Sounds like a riveting time.
Well, hopefully they went home after they went in and got the coach.
Yeah, I'd let them get their coats. No, actually, I made them walk home in the dark with no coats. So
Uphill and back and forth.
Yeah.
But they just had to slug along back into the church to get their coat.
Could you imagine coming back to your parents and like, hey, how was youth tonight? Like, yeah, it was good. We looked at a dumpster.
It was super depressing. We discussed death.
And dumpsters.
Well, what did we do at youth? We just slugged it out.
Yeah, there we go.
Slugged it out.
So now we have not discussed really comics at all. We've talked a lot about God, which is awesome. The most important thing to talk about. But it's advertised as a comic show.
Oh, is it?
Rather than just be a religious discussion by 5 comics guys. Which, that's part of why people tune in, I think, sometimes. Have you guys ever done, I think while I was away, Brandon, I think you were talking about doing a Christmassy comic.
No, I was talking about a story that was inspired by a poorly executed Advent candle accident. So, but I could tell you that story later because I've already told it once and it basically fell flat. Nobody liked it. So anyway,
that's when we all got killed.
Well, I thought it was good. I got asked a question, then we got all cut off.
The story was so bad it killed the stream.
It's right. It destroyed the stream.
I actually, honestly, part of what happened there is my computer totally froze, like my whole system locked, and I think as it was reloading the page, that's what kicked everybody.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
When I got back to the server, I think that's what kicked everybody.
I do have plans though to write. Once I can get my groove going, I want to write. I love what Mignola does with Hellboy and the Christmas specials that he does, and I want to do that with Tennant's Tales. And I've actually got several stories outlined that I'm writing. The first one's called A Reindeer's Tale. That's in my Tennant Tales universe, and it tells all about how reindeer really got the ability to fly. So, it's a pretty cool little story. So I'm looking forward to getting that one done. I would hope to like to get it done by this Christmas, but it's not a comic yet, but it is a little short story. So
has anybody else done Christmas stories?
I haven't done any Christmas stories. Something that probably will end up touching on the Christmas story. I have a arc plan way down in the future of my comic books where time gets changed. Somebody goes back in time and takes out Mary and Joseph, so it just resets time. God's not affected by time. So the Christmas story ends up happening like 2,000 years later or whatever. And my characters having to reset time back to what they're used to. Some of them, you're gonna probably see the Christmas story, maybe even the death and resurrection in there somewhere. I haven't got all the details planned out. That's like 5 years down the road in monthly comic books. So
yeah. Back in our webcomic Force of Good and Evil, we did we called it the holiday special. It's not really a Christmas story per se, but
it was about Life Day.
It's about a kid who's bullied at school, and can you guys still hear me or not? Because my screen locked up.
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. It's about a kid who gets bullied he's a villain school student. He gets bullied, and he happens to run into the mall Santa, and the mall Santa is a retired superhero, and they go and cause a little chaos in villain school. So that's the closest we've come to a Christmas story per se. It's just sort of Christmas themed. It's not really about Christmas.
It's like it's like a Die Hard.
I think Die Hard is more of a Christmas story than our story is.
I kind of feel like Timothy Olsen in the chat. He says, I don't know if I'm worthy to do a Christmas story. I think they're so hard to do one that actually works. There's only so many classics, and then how many attempts that people have done to sort of cash in. And not that that's what you're doing, but there's so many attempts that don't quite make it. And the classics of Christmas stories are pretty small.
Well, they're really hard to do well, right? Yeah. I think to do well and originally, I think it was last year. Time and I just don't get along. I think it was last year at the writers' retreat. I try to have a winter writers' retreat every year with a bunch of pals of mine, and last year a guy challenged us to write a Christmas ghost story, and so that was the year that I wrote my Walter W. Winans story, who's an amazing real world guy, a guy from history that I plucked out of history and turned into a monster hunter. But I found this little blurb about how he took a pot shot at a ghost in Pluckley, England, in 1887, I think it was, and I wrote a little Christmas ghost story revolved around that little incident, and that one's out for sale right now on Amazon. You can go get that one if you want. So
cool.
It's not a comic, but it's a short story.
Yeah. I think like a ghost story, a Christmas ghost story. There's kind of a Christmas ghost story that looms large, in the canon. And yeah, I think sure. That's the thing about Christmas stories is there's these it's a genre unto itself in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a comedy, you can have a drama, but in a sense, like it's a Christmas film, and there's things like It's a Wonderful Life, and then there's A Christmas Carol, and there's not that many other ones, but they're so cultural, culture defining that it's hard to sort of not get compared to them.
Yeah, I mean that's like like you're talking about Die Hard, right? I mean Die Hard, and I really do believe that Die Hard is a genuine Christmas story because it's about the stuff that makes up our cultural Christmas, right? It's about family, it's about preservation, it's about what makes us human, what makes us our lives worth living, and it's also about blowing up German terrorists. So it's a little bit of everything.
There's nothing more Christmassy than that.
Right.
The dropping Hans Gruber off the tower, off the
30-second story of the Nakatomi building.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I was going to say Nakazami, and I knew that wasn't right.
That was next door.
So. Yeah. Well, Gary Shipman is in the chat. He's a fantastic artist. I wonder if he's done any Christmas themed comics. Actually, I know that he's at least drawn a one pager for his comic Packin's Land about Christmas. So
cool.
Very cool.
Yes.
So yeah. I'm familiar with Gary's work as far as like I know it, but I don't really know it like intimately. So
I'm an expert.
I know you are a huge huge booster.
Yes, I'm big Gary Shipman aficionado. I don't like the word fan. There you go, Packin's Land. There it is. In the back of that, that's where you can see that Christmas thing. Yeah, I think I've thought about doing. I've started a few short stories about centered around Christmas time and things. I never quite finish them. I think I don't know that I ever will, but I can't really think of many comics that I've read that really do have a strong Christmas story to them, or
well, DC Comics back in the 90s had routinely would have Christmas material that was part of that. And there was there's some of that was there. They did Christmas specials in I think 94, 95, 96. I've got those. But also like just the regular titles, there'd be, there's a group of mall Santas that are actually terrorists or thieves or whatever, and the Flash has to stop them or whatever. Or that whole thing. Yeah, there would often be some sort of Christmas time themed whatever with it. And as we're getting ready for the show, I considered like digging through my filing cabinets to look for them, but I didn't. So,
heck, a few years ago, I think back in the early thousands, maybe that they had the holiday bash, ones from DC, where they tell different Christmas type stories, from around the DC universe.
Yep.
I think I bought. So you guys are much more. You've read a lot more comic books than me. I think this collective group probably. But I remember at one point they were having that Batman the Brave and the Bold. It was the comic book version of the cartoon they were making, and I think I bought a Christmas episode or a Christmas issue, and it had like a Christmas issue, and then it had like Ragman, who's Jewish, and had a Hanukkah part to it. And I think that's the only Christmas comic I've ever really encountered.
So Ragman, I think, is a really interesting character that I have the biggest I like. I think it's a lost opportunity to really like dig into a thing, because like his story as revealed in the 90s series was that he was Jewish, but he wasn't raised Jewish because his father was in hiding. So he was raised Irish Catholic and then discovered he was Jewish later on. And his dad had been hiding it, had been hiding it his whole life, had been raised lapsed Irish Catholic. And that's something that like was mentioned once and like never touched on again. I was like, that's an interesting little, that would be a real conflict.
Big reveal.
Big reveal. It would be something that would be like hard to get your head around, right? That whole thing would be that would be some interesting stuff to play with, but was never touched on again.
That was a Keith Giffen book, wasn't it?
I think originally it was,
but the 90s one, I mean,
Orlando back in the 70s, the original version. But I think that the miniseries was, I think the two miniseries were, and I think this was actually in the thing I'm talking about was in the back of a like DC Comics Presents or something in the 80s. But I think Geffen wrote the 90s miniseries, both of them. But
well, if DC ever goes down, maybe somebody can grab that Ragman and do something with it.
Right.
So
I call dibs.
I actually was working with a fellow I know on a pitch years ago for Ragman, and some of the ideas that we worked on together I ended up folding into a different story that is in production right now. So it's not exactly the same kind of thing, but I've already cannibalized my ideas for something else. So
well, if they're good, you got to use them, right? Yeah.
So, but yeah, I do know that in Forces, our webcomic, we are working toward, it's probably going to be, oh man, it's going to be long. It's going to be probably 2022, 2023 before we get around to it. But it's not necessarily Christmassy. But I'm going to be doing an adaptation of the play Twelfth Night. That's not a direct adaptation. It's going to be more like inspired by Twelfth Night. That's going to factor big into the mythology of forces, our webcomic. And so it's kind of Christmas themed. So it's going to take place after our hero Chad gets back from the Celtic otherworld. And his birthday is the 6th, is 12th night. So it's going to play into all of that. But
that sounds pretty groovy.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. But that's down the way. We've got other projects before I get back to the webcomic. So
there's also I should mention there's a Bric-a-Brac by Ryan Hack that's on Indiegogo right now, and I have it's the second issue of that, and I had the first issue, and there's been some trouble getting the second one funded, but I'd like to see that. That was a nice little Christmas thing last year.
Well, his thing, it's a whole like planet of Christmas, right?
Yeah, it's like all Christmas all the time. So it was fairly interesting. I'd like to see that get funded. Got 7 days left, and it's 70% of its goal, I think, 80% of its goal. So
yeah, I did an interview with him a couple weeks ago on it for the second time.
Yeah. And
then I did one back in September, I think it was too, when he was on Indiegogo before that. So
I think what's cool about him is, that second issue has had some troubles that he's had to do a couple of campaigns now. And but he just keeps going at it, trying to get it funded. And I think that's noteworthy. I think that's noble to not just give up.
I think some of that stuff comes down to timing too, like what else is available at that moment.
Right.
But I suppose if he keeps at it, by the time he gets done, the book will be finished, and then all he has to do is pay to print it. So then that's a pretty easy sell sometimes.
Well, it's also like a Christmas, it's sort of like Miracle on 34th Street was a big flop when it first came out because it was released in something like July or June, and and so it's also one of those things where like I don't know about you, but I don't watch It's a Wonderful Life until after Thanksgiving. I don't put that in. It's a great movie, but I watch it once a year, and I don't watch the rest of the year. It feels kind of strange,
See, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the other way around, because there's definitely times of year that I'm like, I want to watch that. When it comes to this specific stuff, but like, Christmas carols are kind of thing where I don't necessarily listen to Christmas carols year round, but if I get a hankering, I'd put it in. But my wife, she will not tolerate that. She's just like, no. So it's one of those things where I was somewhat related. There's a fellow I'm friends with on Twitter goes by the NAP Misfit, or non-aggression principle Misfit. And he's a big Misfits fan. And he loves Halloween, not because he loves Halloween, but because nobody tells him to change CDs when he's listening to the Misfits. Because they're his favorite band. It's kind of like me with Christmas, where like, if I'm listening to a Christmas album, people give me crap about it in September, but they won't if it's December. So
it's like I know people that they'll set up their Christmas decorations in like September. They're so excited for Christmas. They'll like do it before Halloween even. And I'm just like, I can't get on that train, man. You gotta celebrate the holidays as they come.
I join retail stores and I start everything in September.
Not comics related, but it is Christmas related. We're currently doing an Advent coloring page release with our Cubekins characters. We're doing one a day for the next 21 days, I guess it is.
Cool.
I just threw a little link out there, so we're just posting one up a day, and so you can grab them on our website, or if you're following us on Twitter or Facebook, we're posting them there as well. Just something for the kids to color. And the story, actually, there's a complete story from day 1 to day 24. So when we're done, it'll sort of be comic-like, but not exactly a panel comic. So
Right. Well, that's cool. I already posted the link in the chat.
Thank you.
And I will go ahead and put that in the description when we're done with the video.
Yeah, just scroll down a little bit. Our pilot that we just released is at the very top. But if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the Cubekins Advent 2020 coloring pages there, and we'll be adding to those each day. So
cool.
So kind of on topic, not exactly comics. So it's black and white line art. So
well, no, I mean, what is a comic, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't have to have Superman in it to be a comic.
Yeah, I think it has to have panels and some sort of movement though to be a comic.
Well, that would cut out a lot of editorial comics, right? So
are those comics?
So my thing, I think the definition of comics are sequential art, right? But that sequence isn't always seen, right?
Okay.
So I think if you have a really good one-panel comic, then the strength of the comic is that it implies what happened before and then implies what happens after. And so then just like you don't always see the punch, but the punch happened in the gutter.
Right.
I think you can do that with a whole panel. I think that Charles Adams, Adams Family are excellent examples of that. Also, if you look at like the
Far Side,
where you know what happened in the first. It's a 3-panel comic that only one panel is drawn because that's how good the implication is of it.
Right. Well, in that case, it is a comic.
Yeah.
Doggone it, because it's going to tell a story, page 1 to page 24.
I think so. I think that counts.
Hey, and just because it's not a comic per se, we're dealing with comic around stuff, So,
yeah. Well, and it's one of those things.
You have the animation movies, like Superman.
We've done a series of little mini coloring books we've sold at cons that are just like 12 pages, but it's a whole story beginning to end, but it's told with one image per page, so you still get that sequential art thing going, just not necessarily the same. And I got a lot of inspiration from that from old Spider-Man and Batman and Superman coloring books that I was reading in the 80s.
And the kids at cons, man, they need something to do. It's so sad, to see them just kind of thrown over in the corner like a couple used rag dolls. It's so sad. We would do that same thing when we were doing cons, pushing our card game. We would create little comic coloring books for all the kids to have something to do.
Yeah. Cool. It's a good thing. So I know you were talking while I was away, the discussion of Christmas traditions had come up. Did everybody have a chance to chime in?
No, that's when Rick killed us.
What?
That's when Rick killed us.
That's when Rick killed us?
Yeah.
I don't think it was Rick. I think it was me.
All right. If you want to take the blame, that's cool. I mean,
it is my show, right? I mean, the bunch
substitutionary. I don't really. That's a question I get a lot. Is like, do you have Christmas traditions? And I have to say, like, no. I'm reading the Bible. It's like just the usual stuff. Putting up a tree, opening presents.
No rhyme games with Amari Lloyd.
No. Nope. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah, we didn't either. Yeah, it's very American that way. But no, like I said, I talked about the wreath earlier. That's one thing that we always do. We usually make peanut brittle or something like that because I just love that stuff. And it's a good excuse to have it when I don't get scolded. Sometimes I buy peanut brittle throughout the year and get looks. It's like
actually, I can think of one thing my mom used to do every year, but it's been quite some time because we haven't had the money. Make her own homemade eggnog. That is really good.
Now, here's one thing that I think is crazy. I'm a big eggnog fan, right? You can only get eggnog autumn, early winter, right? I mean, you can make it anytime you want. I know, yeah. But it sells so well. You'd think there'd be a market for it
all year round.
But it doesn't matter if there's a market for it. The chickens will only lay the boozy eggs when it gets cold outside.
Well, maybe it does so well because it is only there once a year for that limited time. Maybe if it was around all year, it wouldn't do quite as well.
It's sort of like pumpkin spice at Starbucks. Like these people want it all year round, but they gotta wait. They gotta wait to get their pumpkin spice. You know?
Yeah, I tell you. Well, and they used to have like you could only get eggnog in the stores between like Thanksgiving and Christmas, and now you can get it like Halloween eggnog, which is get it in September.
Ween nog.
And it's just an orange carton instead of a red one. It's the only difference.
So my bunch, we definitely had some and still have some traditions. So first of all, my wife's family is that Christmas is kind of their holiday. And so every year, Christmas Eve, we always get together at my wife's mom's house, and she makes all these amazing goodies, and everybody brings something to eat, and we have a candlelight dinner together. We go to Heather's mom's church, and they have a candlelight service. That's really, really nice. And then we then open presents, and just hang out with each other. And of course, it's Christmas Eve, so people have to kind of get home and get ready for Santa Claus to come. When our kids were smaller, we would always read Luke, the story of the Advent in Luke, and then we'd also always read the night before Christmas. On the night before Christmas, we'd do both of those, Christmas Eve. And then we always had an elf in the house, or elf on the shelf, or a pest in the nest, or whatever those things are. And then when my kids were smaller, I would always write a letter to them from Santa. And I would do it in calligraphy and on parchment paper, and have it all rolled up and with a special ribbon, and have it waiting for them in the morning. And it would always talk about, how they had been over the year, and how Santa Claus and Jesus were conspiring against them. It always mentioned Christ, obviously, but it was from Santa, and it was a lot of fun, and the kids really enjoyed it. So those were kind of
that's cool.
Our traditions when they were growing up.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say my wife makes homemade cranberry bliss bars. I've had those from Starbucks. They're like, she found some recipe online to duplicate those, and she makes those for Christmas. So
sweet.
Gorging myself on sweets. That's my tradition.
I love cranberry stuff. I legitimately buy cranberry stuff all year round. Like, cranberry dressing, and I'll use it in stuff, and people look at me funny. I don't care. That's the one thing they can't take away from me.
Yeah, cranberries are the only good raisin out there. I mean,
that's true.
They're American. And nothing's more American than cranberries,
right?
Except for turkeys.
Yeah. So Nick, what about you, man?
We had an unintentional one when I was real young. My grandmother absolutely loved the movie Christmas Family Vacation with Chevy Chase and that. And so that was just always on in the background. Like on Christmas Day, we'd get together. So then I ended up loving it, and now I watch it every Christmas Day. And it's just kind of an unintentional one where we kind of, it's not appropriate, but it gets shown. But I just love that opening scene where they're on the wagon, and they're driving, and just that whole entire opening scene. So it's not really Christian in any way, but it's non-liturgical. One of the things that may not be typically traditional in ours is we like to celebrate many of the things in Christmas related, like we pretend that Santa's brought gifts, but we teach more on the idea of Saint Nick and the idea of like giving to people, and the true foundation of like where the actual stories originated from before the myth, legend, and all that stuff started to bleed into it. Because one of the things that me and my wife early on started talking about when our first child was born was, okay, we're gonna teach them about Santa, and then we're gonna tell them later, like, hey, joke's on you, we were lying, kid. And then, but hey, Jesus, he's real. We're not lying about that one. So, hey, still, we're doing good. So that was an early on thing that we chose to at least use the teachings of like giving to people, giving to the poor, and getting and just doing away with the materialistic part of it, but still celebrating and like we have them go buy for each other and buy for their mom or whatever, and get lists together. So it's a little hard though, because we'll go to Sunday school and one of our oldest will walk and be like, Santa's not real. And we're like, no, don't ruin it for others yet. Don't do that.
So we had a similar thing. Both Amy and I had kind of a, both when we were dating and getting married and whatever, kind of had this mutual discussion about like how, you know, when we discovered Santa wasn't real, it was kind of, wasn't just a joke. There was like an existential, like, what's up with that? You know, I wasn't mad at my parents, but I was really confused about why you'd bother not. Okay. And we just wanted to be super honest with our kids about it. And I think St. Nicholas is an awesome dude.
Right.
My wife says her favorite a Christmas story is the time St. Nicholas punched a guy in the mouth for saying Jesus wasn't God. And,
dude's brutal.
I love that. And I love that that's her favorite Christmas story.
Oh, where's that found?
She's it's in the Council of Nicaea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Arius
had it coming. Anyhow, so we didn't do the Santa thing with our kids. And you know, and then Amy's parents really wanted to, so we kind of let them know that that's something that people do. And, you know, and so we're like, okay, so you can't ruin it for other people or whatever else, because that's the thing. And it was like, well, why? Our oldest boy was like, well, why would people? Well, we don't know. We don't know. We really can't give a good reason for why. One day, Donovan was 6. We talked about St. Nicholas being a real person, being the basis for these legends, and that, you know, he, you know, of course, died 1,500 years ago, you know, and you know, the whole thing. One day we were at a Goodwill, I think it was, in Cheyenne. Dude in a Santa suit comes in. They're doing the big picture with Santa thing, and Donovan breaks down crying.
Oh no!
Our oldest, he's just weeping, and we're like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And he was convinced that Santa had been risen from the dead. that he was witness to a miracle. And funny. I was just like, I was so angry. This was during my angry phase before like all that stuff. But part of it, I was so angry because here I had to tell my kid, my whole purpose was to not break my kid's heart. Here I had to explain to my kid, yes, resurrection is real. No, that's just a dude in a suit.
That's a great story because it encapsulates parenting. You do everything you can to protect them from the thing, whatever the thing is, and sure enough, the thing happens anyway.
So yeah, that was exactly the thing. And so then I was, and at first I was just, and like I said, I was conflicted. I was whatever. And so I was really angry about it. And Amy's like, you can't be mad at them for this. That's not reasonable. And I was like, so I wasn't ready to
But you were mad at that. You were mad at that. You could be mad.
The fact is I had issues that I hadn't dealt with, and there was pride stuff that was part of it. So I wasn't ready to listen to her yet.
Yeah. I hear you, brother. Me and you both.
She is oftentimes wiser than I am. So,
yep. Well, yeah. Like I told you last time, Reese, I think we were separated at birth or something. I think we're same exact story. So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. I've been at it since 6 this morning. So
it's just about 9 anyway. And I know it's a little shorter show than normal because we have the technical difficulties. We had some people show up late. Appreciate you guys coming along. And to all the panel, thanks for tuning in. Before we go, I do want to go ahead and say next week is a special show. We're doing a what I'm calling a Dan-a-thon. My friend Dan Connor, who is a comicer out of Denver, Colorado, was diagnosed with leukemia in early October, and actually spent about 4 weeks in a medically induced coma because they discovered it like suddenly, and he was having kidney failure, all kinds of stuff. He appeared to be on the mend. but he was in a hospital bed for 3.5 weeks. So with a lot of that kind of stuff, we are doing a fundraising show. We're going to have some big name guests on. Doug Tenaple is going to be here. Ben Dunn is going to be here. And we're going to try to highlight Dan's GoFundMe. If I was smart, I would have put the link in the chat, but I don't have it prepared. And I don't want to make everybody wait around for that. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'll be sharing that again. And plus the shows next week is going to be featured about that. Dan is probably going to be joining us from his hospital bed as well, because he can't leave the hospital yet. Also, Denver is in the middle of a COVID outbreak too, so nobody can go see him.
Fun.
So it's he's on super lockdown. But yeah, no, it wasn't Rick Bullet. It was me.
Oh, my God, to blame me for everything.
I mean, I know definitely for the panelists, we need to make that a matter of prayer as well. I mean, that's huge. So,
oh, hey. While I was talking, Firefox Pro looked it up for me. So we'll
he seems to be on top of things in his moody lighting.
Yeah. To hide the messy room.
He's going for the best cinematography of all the panelists.
Well,
So.
he does do video production.
Oh, does he? Oh,
true.
Well, hit me up. We may need to chat.
Oh, awesome. And if not, I can recommend people even better than me. So,
well, what was that one that you did? You did about a month ago about it was an essay video about essay videos.
Oh yeah, why video essays suck.
Yeah,
so it was a video essay about why video essays suck. So yeah.
It is really, really good.
Great.
You definitely people should go seek that out on his channel. So
that's awesome.
But anyway, we'll go ahead and call it there. Thanks for coming in there, and don't forget that we are in the prequel to the big show. We're leading this Advent. We're leading up to the Christmas, which is still only the beginning.
Oh, that big show. Okay,
that big show.
I got the big show.
The big show. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one.